Record 1, the death row pardon 8 interceptions in a single game. On September 24, 1950, Chicago Cardinals signal caller Jim Hardy lived through a catastrophe that contemporary analytics would classify as an extinction-level event. In one solitary contest against the Philadelphia Eagles, Hardy launched 8 interceptions. To compound the disaster, he also coughed up 2 fumbles, totaling 10 turnovers credited to a single human being within a 60-minute span. The mythology surrounding this matchup is as strange as the statistics. Hardy allegedly survived an automobile collision en route to the venue that morning, which functioned as a prophetic warning for the destruction about to unfold on the gridiron. In the contemporary NFL, a quarterback is generally yanked after 3 or 4 picks to maintain squad morale and shield the investment. In 1950, roster options were limited, and the grind-it-out mentality was gospel, which meant Hardy was compelled to remain and perpetuate the implosion. And today, the social media firing squad and the around-the-clock sports media would compel a head coach's decision by intermission. No current player would be permitted to stay on the field long enough to fail 8 times. The visuals of the sport have transformed, and safeguarding a player's psychological state is now paramount for any organization. Record 2, the 1929 malfunction, 40 individual points in one game. On Thanksgiving Day in 1929, Ernie Nevers of the Chicago Cardinals delivered a showing that registers as a computational anomaly in today's framework. Nevers accounted for every single point for his squad in a 42-6 demolition of the Chicago Bears. This encompassed 6 rushing scores and 4 successful point-after attempts, all executed by the same individual. This benchmark is deemed untouchable because of the specialization epoch. In football's infancy, the Iron Man was the norm. Your premier athlete carried the ball, threw the ball, and kicked the ball without ever departing the field. In 2025, roster architecture and physical requirements prohibit this degree of versatility. Even if a contemporary star like Saquon Barkley punched in 6 touchdowns in a single contest, he would never be summoned to boot the extra points. That duty belongs exclusively to the kicker, an athlete whose complete career is devoted to one precise movement. Contemporary specialization has effectively eliminated the possibility of a 40-point individual output from existence. Record 3, the unspoken agreement, 7 passing touchdowns in a game. The benchmark for passing touchdowns in a single contest currently rests at 7, a threshold that has been equaled 8 times by icons such as Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, and even Nick Foles. While contemporary offenses are more dynamic and aerial than ever before, the 8th touchdown persists as the invisible barrier of the NFL. The obstacle preventing this benchmark from falling is not an absence of ability, but rather the unwritten code of etiquette and compassion. When a quarterback reaches 7 touchdowns, the margin is typically so overwhelming that the competition is functionally concluded. At that juncture, contemporary coaches extract their starters to avert needless injuries and to dodge the tasteless reputation of piling on points in a rout. Once the starter is removed, the reserve quarterback takes the field. The playbook contracts to elementary clock-consuming ground plays, and the opportunity for an 8th touchdown evaporates. Record 4, the mundane outlier, 7 fair catches in a game. This benchmark, shared by multiple players including Leo Lewis in 1984, represents a contest where a returner signaled for a fair catch 7 distinct times. It is a record that exists due to a particular ideal confluence of anemic offense and superior special teams hang time. This is progressively unbreakable because of statistical punting. Contemporary punters are no longer merely booting for yardage. They are craftsmen in targeted kicking, engineered to steer the ball out of bounds or trigger a touchback. Furthermore, the NFL has drastically modified kickoff and punt regulations to encourage touchbacks for player welfare. A contemporary returner is far more inclined to let a ball bounce into the end zone or accept an automatic touchback under the revised fair catch rules than to position themselves under 7 consecutive airtime punts. The contemporary game is abandoning the punt return altogether, making this statistic a vestige of a more hesitant era of special teams. Record 5. The backfield proprietor, 7 sacks in a single game. In 1990, Derek Thomas logged 7 sacks in a single contest against the Seattle Seahawks, an exhibition of defensive supremacy that has not been replicated in over 3 decades. He essentially established a permanent residence inside the Seahawks' backfield that afternoon, the rapid release. Transformation has rendered this benchmark a phantom for contemporary edge rushers. Today's quarterbacks are conditioned from adolescence to release the ball in an average of 2.4 to 2.5 seconds. To accomplish 7 sacks in 2025, an athlete would have to defeat an elite 300-pound offensive tackle 7 distinct times in under 2 seconds, a physical near impossibility. Additionally, roughing the passer infractions have contracted the contact zone for legal hits so dramatically that many plays that would have been sacks in 1990 are now flagged as 15-yard personal fouls. The window to make contact is narrower, the quarterbacks are swifter, and the officials are more protective than ever. Record 6. The unregulated season, 42 interceptions. In 1962, George Blanda established a record that stands as a monument to a distinct era of football reasoning, throwing 42 interceptions in a single campaign. What makes this statistic truly unfathomable by contemporary standards is that Blanda wasn't removed. He played the complete season, and remarkably, his squad still advanced to the championship contest. Why? It's unbreakable. In the contemporary NFL, precision and ball protection are the primary metrics for a quarterback. Today, an interception frequency that elevated would result in a player being released or benched long before they hit the midpoint of the season. In the 1960s, the aerial game was often a launch-it-and-hope approach, but contemporary offensive systems are constructed on expected value and accuracy. For perspective, Jameis Winston's 30-interception campaign in 2019 was treated as a historic statistical catastrophe, and he was still 12 picks shy of Blanda's record. Record 7. The unconscionable workload, 492 touches in a season. In 1984, James Wilder of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers was subjected to a burden that would likely prompt a league-wide inquiry today. He accumulated 492 total touches, combining rushes and receptions in a 16-game span. Wilder wasn't merely the primary weapon. He was essentially the complete offensive mechanism, snap after snap. Why? It's unbreakable. This benchmark has been effectively removed from the game by workload management and the running back by committee, RBBC methodology. Contemporary teams regard running backs as disposable assets and employ rotations to maintain their fitness for the postseason or subsequent seasons. No training staff in 2025 would authorize a player to absorb the sheer volume of high-velocity impacts required to reach 500 touches. The science of the game now dictates that a player's effectiveness declines markedly after a certain threshold, making Wilder's 1984 campaign a relic of a replaceable commodity mindset. Record 8. The Phantom Season, 14 interceptions as a rookie Night Train Lane's 1952 campaign is a statistical aberration that appears to violate the principles of football physics. As a first-year player, he secured 14 interceptions in just 12 contests, averaging over 1 pick per outing. He accomplished this in an era when the ball was scarcely spiraling and passing concepts were rudimentary. Why? It's unbreakable. The principal obstacle here is defensive recognition. In the contemporary game, if a cornerback records even 3 or 4 interceptions in the initial month of the season, quarterbacks simply cease throwing the ball in their vicinity. They will aim at the opposite side of the field or seek a mismatch elsewhere. To accumulate 14 interceptions, a player needs to be targeted consistently, but the superior a cornerback performs, the fewer opportunities they receive. Contemporary lockdown corners often conclude seasons with minimal interceptions, precisely because they are so dominant that they become phantoms whom quarterbacks decline to challenge. Record 9. The analytics casualty, 51.4 yards per punt. Sammy Baugh's 1940 benchmark of 51.4 yards per punt has endured for over 80 years, despite the reality that contemporary athletes are more powerful, quicker, and more technically refined. Why it's unbreakable. The demise of this record is a consequence of net yardage analytics. In 1940, punters were encouraged to simply launch the ball as far as conceivable. Today, if a punter boots the ball 60 yards into the end zone, it produces a touchback, which is a statistical failure for the special teams unit. Contemporary punters are specialists in targeted kicking and hang time, striving to trap the opponent inside the 10-yard line rather than maximize distance. Analytics have shifted the objective from gross distance to field position, making Baugh's raw yardage record a victim of strategic refinement. Record 10, the physically inconceivable, 2,105 rushing yards. Eric Dickerson's 2,105-yard output in 1984 remains the benchmark for rushing brilliance. Even with the incorporation of a 17th game to the schedule, this record continues to remain on the shelf, undisturbed. Why it's unbreakable. The greatest obstacle isn't the number of games. It's the evolution of the athlete. In 1984, Dickerson was frequently running against 250-year-old linebackers who were constructed for punishing contact. Today's linebackers are 230-year-old sprinters who can pursue elite running backs from behind. The home run 80-yard rush has become considerably rarer because defensive pursuit trajectories are now optimized by computer analysis and superior lateral velocity. Additionally, most contemporary offenses have transitioned to a pass-first doctrine, meaning no running back receives the 30 carry per game volume required to flirt with 2,100 yards. Advancing into the next 5 records, we shift from seasonal anomalies to the errors in the matrix. Performances so commanding they compelled the league to reconsider how the game is conducted, and the commencement of the Iron Man career streaks. Record 11, the error in the matrix, 1,964 receiving yards in 2012 Calvin. Johnson, known as Megatron, delivered a campaign that remains the apex of wide receiver dominance, 1,964 yards in just 16 contests. This wasn't a byproduct of a balanced offense. It was the result of Matthew Stafford force-feeding his primary target even when he was surrounded by triple coverage. Why it's unbreakable. The demise of this record lies in contemporary, balanced distribution. Offensive coordinators today, shaped by the triumph of progression-based systems, believe that depending on one target renders the offense too predictable. In the current NFL, if a receiver is double covered, the quarterback is instructed to locate the open tight end or the scat back in the flat. Force-feeding one individual nearly 2,000 yards is now perceived as a failure of offensive architecture. Unless a squad possesses a generational talent paired with a complete absence of other receiving alternatives, no one will ever command a sufficient target share to catch Megatron. The Red Zone Horror, 23. Receiving touchdowns. Randy Moss's 2007 campaign with the New England Patriots was more than merely a statistical outlier. It was a horror for defensive coordinators. He logged 23 touchdowns in 16 contests, a record driven by Tom Brady's MVP campaign and Moss's sheer physical verticality. Why it's unbreakable. Contemporary defenses have effectively eliminated this through specialized red zone coverage. Inside the 20-yard line, squads now deploy cloud coverage or bracket schemes specifically constructed to neutralize the top receiving threat. To counteract this, contemporary offenses have pivoted to utilizing power slots or 6-6 tight ends as the primary red zone options, distributing the touchdowns across the roster. To shatter this record, a receiver would need to be the sole viable red zone target on a squad that refuses to run the ball near the goal line, a scenario that contemporary balanced coaching avoids. Record 13, the Pressure Summit, 22.5 sacks in a season. The single-season sack benchmark of 22.5 is shared by Michael Strahan and T.J. Watt. While this is the most attainable on paper due to the 17th contest, the 23-sack threshold remains a brutal obstacle. Why it's unbreakable. The principal hurdle here is the holding non-call. It is a widely accepted, though unofficial, reality in the NFL that officials permit offensive linemen a certain degree of holding against elite pass rushers to protect the marquee quarterbacks from being struck on every snap. If every holding penalty against a player like T.J. Watt or Myles Garrett were actually whistled, the record would have fallen years ago. To reach 23 sacks today, an edge rusher must overcome not just the offensive line, but the officiating bias that prioritizes the rhythm of the game over defensive dominance. Record 14, the obsolete play, 10 kickoff return TDs. Josh Cribbs and Leon Washington each hold the benchmark for 10 career kickoff return. Touchdowns, a statistic that now belongs to a different iteration of football. Why it's unbreakable. This benchmark wasn't surpassed by a player, it was discontinued by the league office. For safety considerations, the NFL has systematically legislated the kickoff return out of the game. By relocating the kickoff line forward and modifying touchback regulations to encourage kneeling in the end zone, return opportunities have plummeted. Contemporary returners are now coached to accept the touchback to avoid high-velocity collisions. You cannot break a benchmark for a play that essentially no longer transpires in the contemporary game. Record 15, the Iron Man, 297 consecutive starts. Brett Favre's streak of 297 consecutive starts is perhaps the most remarkable feat of endurance in sports history. For 19 years, he played through fractured thumbs, pneumonia, and Bounty Gate blows without ever missing a single Monday morning. Why it's unbreakable. This benchmark has been rendered impossible by the concussion protocol. Rendered impossible by the concussion protocol. In Favre's era, a quarterback could battle through after a devastating hit. Today, if a player's helmet contacts the turf and they exhibit any sign of instability, they are immediately extracted from the contest for a mandatory independent assessment. A $200 million quarterback is no longer permitted to play through the haze. Because we now prioritize brain health over toughness, one minor injury or one wobble is all it takes to terminate a streak. Record 16, the Sack Summit, 200 career sacks, Bruce Smith. Bruce Smith's 200 career sacks represent a level of longevity and mechanical precision that contemporary edge rushers might only attain if they managed to duplicate themselves. Smith was more than a physical marvel. He was a craftsman who played for 19 years and never experienced a substantial decline in production. To put this figure in perspective, a player would need to average double-digit sacks every single year for 2 decades to even approach this territory. Even elite active players like Von Miller, who has spent over a decade terrorizing quarterbacks, are still roughly 40 sacks away from the peak. The principal reason this benchmark is protected is the contemporary NFL's shift toward the edge rotation philosophy. In Bruce Smith's era, star defensive ends were Ironmen who remained on the field for nearly 100% of the defensive snaps. In the contemporary game, defensive coordinators prioritize rested legs over star wattage. Even the most dominant rushers in the league today, such as T.J. Watt or Myles Garrett, are frequently rotated off the field for 20% to 30% of the contest to keep them explosive for the fourth quarter. Furthermore, the time to throw metric has fundamentally altered the mathematics of sacking. Quarterbacks today release the ball faster than ever, and offensive schemes utilize max protection or chip blocks from tight ends and running backs to neutralize star rushers. Bruce Smith played in an era where he could defeat his man and actually have time to reach the quarterback. Today, even when a rusher beats their man, they often only have half a second to make contact before the ball is flicked into the turf or out to a check down. 200 sacks is the mountaintop, and in a league of rotations and rapid releases, it is a very solitary summit. Record 17, the astronomical total, 22,895 career receiving yards, Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice did not merely break the career receiving benchmark, he launched it into an orbit that contemporary physics cannot attain. His 20,895 receiving yards represent over 13 miles of catching footballs while being pursued by world-class athletes. To comprehend how preposterous this total is, consider this. If a contemporary receiver entered the league and logged exactly 1,500 yards every single campaign for 15 consecutive years, they would still fall short of Rice's mark. The obstacle here is not merely talent. It is the contemporary reality of fatigue and workload management. Most elite wide receivers today hit a physical cliff around age 32 or 33. As soon as they lose half a step of top-end velocity, their production collapses. Jerry Rice, however, was a biological aberration. At age 40, he was still logging 800-yard campaigns. At age 41, he was running routes that were crisper and more precise than half the league's starters. Rice's benchmark is a testament to an obsession with conditioning and route running that contemporary brand-focused players rarely maintain. Contemporary legends like Calvin Johnson retired early to preserve their well-being, and stars like Julio Jones or DeAndre Hopkins have seen injuries obstruct their pursuit of history. In today's NFL, players are often encouraged to heed their bodies and retire before they face permanent damage. Jerry Rice simply refused to heed. He kept going and going until he reached a figure that acts as a biological barrier against the rest of human history. Record 18, the human calendar, 274 consecutive games with a catch. Jerry Rice. This benchmark measures a form of dependability that is almost impossible to duplicate in a high-contact sport. Jerry Rice went 274 consecutive contests, spanning 17 full campaigns, without a single off day, a single injury gap, or a single goose egg in the stat sheet. It means that for 17 years, regardless of the conditions, the quarterback, the opponent, or his own fitness, Jerry Rice caught a football. In today's NFL, the catch streak is constantly jeopardized by decoy assignments and bracket coverage. Contemporary defensive coordinators like Bill Belichick have made careers out of neutralizing the one. If a contemporary star receiver is double or triple covered for an entire contest, the quarterback is instructed to throw elsewhere, which often results in the star receiver being blanked. Furthermore, the contemporary workload management culture means that if a star receiver has a sore hamstring or a minor calf strain, they sit out a week to prevent a larger injury. Jerry Rice played through those minor ailments. He was always open, always pertinent, and never irrelevant in a game plan, even when he transitioned into an R3 role later in his career. To shatter this, you would need a receiver who never misses a snap, never gets blanked by an elite corner, and plays until they are 40. In other words, you would need to recreate Jerry Rice from scratch. Record 19, the center fielder, 81. Career interceptions, Paul Krause. Paul Krause's 81 career interceptions are a relic of an unregulated era of passing that has been effectively eliminated from the game by quarterback efficiency. In the 1960s and 70s, quarterbacks were encouraged to hurl deep, contested balls into heavy traffic. The deep prayer was a viable offensive approach, which permitted ball-hawking safeties like Krause to patrol the middle of the field like center fielders in baseball. Today, the game is governed by the safe check down and the expected value of a pass. Quarterbacks are trained from high school to value ball protection above all else. Throwing a 50-50 ball is now considered a terminable offense for a contemporary signal caller. Because quarterbacks throw fewer interceptable balls, contemporary safeties simply do not receive the 81 opportunities required to match Krause. Additionally, there is the acknowledgement factor. If an elite contemporary safety like Ed Reed or Minkah Fitzpatrick starts a campaign with a high interception rate, quarterbacks simply cease looking at their side of the field. They will actively target the weaker link in the secondary to avoid the turnover. Paul Krause played in a time when quarterbacks were more reckless and less mechanical in their progressions. As the NFL moves toward a more optimized, low-risk version of passing, Krause's 81 interceptions remain protected in a vault that contemporary efficiency has locked forever. Record 20, the nauseating win count, 251 wins. Tom Brady. Tom Brady's 251 career wins as a starting quarterback is a benchmark that defies the very principles of NFL economics. To understand the magnitude of this figure, you have to realize that it represents double-digit victories, 10-plus wins per campaign for 25 consecutive years, and Brady only played for 23 campaigns. He transcended logic, he transcended physics, and he transcended every other legend to sit on a throne that is mathematically unattainable for the contemporary player. The principal obstacle here is the pull of the salary cap. The NFL is designed for parity. It is constructed to make teams go 9-8 through the draft and cap restrictions. When a quarterback becomes great, they eventually demand a massive percentage of the team's salary cap, which compels the team to cut talent elsewhere. This usually results in a slump or a down year where the squad struggles to win contests. Brady managed to defy this pull for 2 decades through a combination of elite fitness, strategic pay cuts to retain talent around him, and a level of obsession that most human beings find nauseating. Contemporary stars like Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen are incredible athletes, but their mobility makes them more susceptible to the injury cliff. Brady stayed in the pocket, avoided the devastating hits, and won for 23 campaigns straight. To surpass this, a quarterback would need 20-plus years of perfect fitness, sustained dominance, and a front office that never fails to rebuild the roster. Brady's 251 wins is the NFL's Mount Everest, and the oxygen is simply too thin for anyone else to reach the summit. Conclusion: the specters of the gridiron. We watch the NFL for the spectacle, the 70-yard bombs, and the legendary records that push human limits. But these records aren't just figures. They are artifacts of an unregulated era before workload management and concussion protocols. From Dickerson's goggles to Favre's iron-willed streak, these milestones represent a version of football built on a disregard for the long-term price of the game. We celebrate legends like Jerry Rice and Tom Brady, but we must acknowledge the thousands whose bodies fueled this engine. The record book tells us who reached the mountaintop, but the elimination of these statistics shows the league realized the cost was too high. The scoreboard shows who won, but these unbreakable records reveal the permanent toll of the past. If you want to understand the hidden logic behind the world's biggest sports, subscribe and hit the bell. Thanks for watching.